You need to have something now. And so you need to work with the things that are out there, adapt them. And maybe it's not the 100% solution, but it's better to have 80 or 70% now to be able to fight with something than waiting for the 100% in 5 years.
Hey, SpaceWatchers, and welcome to another Space Café Radio. Germany began 2025 by rewriting the rules of its own financial constitution and ended the year by announcing a 35 billion euro space defense ambition, plus the 5.3 billion euro ESA budget. It is the biggest political and financial shift in German space and security policies in decades. I'm honored to discuss these in a framework of an annual review with Dr. Antje Nötzold, senior researcher for support of arms controls in space at the University of the Bundeswehr. Antje, how are you doing today?
Hey, Thorsten, great. It's great to be in your podcast.
Thanks for accepting this invitation. Let's start with a very generic question. Why is 2025 qualitatively different from the years before, 22 to 24, and not just more of the same?
So that's the one big elephant in the room. It's also the Trump administration that changed a lot when we look at the geopolitics in general. So it changed a lot of geopolitics worldwide, you can say. But also for Europe, it's different. Like the last 2 or 3 years, we were learning to talk geopolitics again. But I would say the difference to this year is that we started talking astropolitics.
It's interesting. And I'm quite sure we will go deeper into that. Let's start with Germany's constitutional reset, from the Schuldenbremse to strategic spending, and how Germany created fiscal and political space for defense in space. And that's my angle I'm addressing with the first question. Again, Germany changed its constitution in spring and opened the door for massive defense and space spending. And from your perspective, was this a strategic necessity or a risky political shortcut?
So I would say it was both. So first of all, we have to think about it was a very risky political situation for the Democrats, for conservatives, because 2 months before in the election campaign, they were saying that we will keep the Schuldenbremse, we will not make more debts, that will be a fiscal risky situation. But then a lot of things changed, and especially it was the speech of Vice President Vance at the Munich Security Conference, which really changed her perspective. I was also get the insights from the administration and from some ministries. So they now really see that they cannot rely on the US any longer and that they need to be able to, this time really addressing autonomy and sovereignty in Europe for their own. So that really changed the situation. And it was a strategic necessity. And so before we had 2022, when we had the Russian full-scale invasion in Ukraine, we had the 100 billion special fund for defense. And so it was also discussions to maybe have another special fund. But this solution was quite clever because if you have a special fund, your enemies and also Russia will know the amount of money you're going to spend. So they can calculate how much tanks you can buy, how much ships you can buy, or how much systems you can buy. So there's an end to it. Now, when we say everything above 1% is for defense spending, 1% of the GDP for defense spending is cut off the Schuldenbremse, of the debt brake. So then you cannot calculate how much money will be spent in the next years. So it's more flexible. And so that's really was clever, and it was strategic necessity. The last 30 years, we spent far too less for defense.
When we now focus on space, so Berlin talks now about the 35 billion for space defense by 2030, what is in 4 or 5 years, depending how you want to calculate it. So do you see a coherent space power strategy emerging, or is Germany still improvising at high speed?
So when the 35 billion were announced for space defense at the end of September, we didn't have the strategy yet, but it was like a kind of a get together. So it was a situation that we know that we will address the money and then there will be the strategy coming up. It was already written. And now it is published a few weeks ago, like last month. And now we see it is a coherent space strategy. So I would assess that German strategy for security and safety in space is very coherent. It's very precise. And so it is in combination with the 35 billion announced, it is now possible to fill the capability gap that we have in space in Germany and also improving the European capabilities that we have in space. We are still improving, and improvising, and maybe not at high speed, but we see that we need to do it high speed. So when Germany talks about being able to defend itself or being kriegstüchtig, as we call it, until 2029, calculated by the Russian buildup of capabilities to be able to, or might be able to attack a NATO territory. So then we need to improvise to fill these gaps with the systems that are already on the market or to develop new technologies pretty quick.
Talking with the militaries, as we have done it over the last weeks, I think there's this shift from we have time, but no money. And now there is money, but we don't have time. And give me what you have or show me what you have, because money is not an issue anymore. It seems to be a very dramatic shift of narrative towards the industry as well.
Definitely, exactly what you said. Now they say we have money, but we have no time any longer. And that's also a shift in the risk management. It comes together that now they see that it don't have to be the 100% suitable system with all these special ads you want to have. And then it might take the individual solution that might take years to develop and to build. So when you have no time, then it counts. What do you have? How can you work with the things that are there to be able to fight tonight? Which we see and we learn from Ukraine, that sometimes you don't have the time.
Can you tell me where this fight tonight comes from? Is it something new or is it something that was there for quite some time?
I think it's nothing new completely, but it's used now public to show the population that's the major thing that an army must be capable of. They need to be able to react and to fight if something happens this time. So it also was talking about a lot of things we don't have in the Bundeswehr and that we need and that we are lacking. It was also to say that, okay, we have to do, then we need to be able to start fighting with the things we have. We are aware of it and we are capable to react. So we are planning for how we can do it the best way of fighting and protecting ourselves with new systems in a few years, rather than we also have strategies and capabilities to fight now if we need.
Let's have a look more on the geopolitics and on the other side of the pond. In April, at the Space Symposium, the US Space Force promoted unity under the banner of One Team Space. So months later, Washington halted major parts of its intelligence supports to the Ukraine. That was earlier this year. And this sudden reversal exposed how dependent allies are on American space-based data. So how did the abrupt cutoff of US intelligence and commercial imagery for Ukraine reshape Europe's understanding of strategic dependence in space?
I think it was a really, you cannot say blow up, but it really changed how they assess like the credibility and the trust that they can have in our most important strategic partner in security and defense issues. And this in combination with the speech of Vance at the Munich Security Conference, it showed them that it's not only words, there can be deep following up. So that's something that they realized, that you cannot take it for granted that we will always have the access on these data, and not only the intelligence data, but was also quite, can say, disruptive of your thoughts. There was also the thinking that we could use commercial assets, commercial space assets and services to fill our gaps we have. But then also Trump did not only stop the sharing of intelligence data with Ukraine, there was also the stop that Maxar was not allowed to sell his observation imagery to Ukraine any longer. And so it also put a question mark on the assessment that we might be able to use commercial assets instead of having own capabilities. This altogether raised the awareness in the community, not only the military, but also in the political sphere, that we need own assets to fill those gaps, that we need to cooperate, but we also need to be able to have space-based assets and capabilities for our own.
It sounds a bit like a back and forth. On one hand side, we are working together. I mean, if we take it fast forward to today, mid-December, we saw just the release of the US National Security Strategy and assessment about Europe. On the other hand, 2 days back, there was another agreement between the inspector of the German Air Force and General Salzman, a letter of intent of increasing collaboration on space. So for me, it's very hard to digest these mixed signals that you get. It sounds like you have an angel and the devil on your shoulders and talking from both sides. How do you see that?
maybe it's not the ancient devil, but it's different levels. So I want different signals, but they come from different levels. So that's something I would say we have to distinguish between, on the one side, there's the administration, so there's the political level, and the signs we see from then is like that's more policy driven. It's driven by what's the president, what's the administration, who are the person who are governing the country. And then the other side is the military side. And they did not change in their attitude. So as you mentioned, for them, space is still a team sport. For them, they see the added value of cooperation in space. And they see that other countries can also contribute, even though they see the US in a leading role, also at the military side. So I would not say there are mixed signals from the same country, yes, but are still coherent signals from the different levels, even though they give us different signals. So that's we always seen in other administrations before, in the first Trump administration. So there's still the working level, which is still working and looking for cooperation. The difference is that now the political level, the administrative level, they even want to go deeper with their approach and also addressing working levels and sub-cooperation and working level. That's not happened with the Space Force yet. So we still have corporations, we still have CISPO, we have Olympic Defender. Nevertheless, it's harder to keep the working level.
What do you think? What is Europe at the moment for the US? Is it still a partner, a client, or a problem to be managed?
So from the political level, I would say it's a client to be managed, you can say. So it's definitely not a partner any longer, even though a partner not on the same eye level. It is the when speech and now in the national security strategy. So you see that they assess Europe as something problematic, something that they still depend too much on the United States. They don't want to take care for us any longer. Then all these special MAGA and Trump thinking comes in. Talking about that we have no clear democracy in Europe, and there's nothing that strange developments from their point of view. We don't have free speech, for example, and other stuff. So that sounds pretty weird from a European perspective, but we have to take this seriously and think, how do we react on this?
I think the rhetoric is something that is very concerning for many of us in the field, in the reporting field or in the political field, and we have to find our way with it. But let's have a look towards Europe. I think that's also something we have to learn, that we should look first Europe and then see how that might apply to others. So we don't have to be everybody's darling anymore, I think. Mm-hmm. 2025 was Europe's strategy year, I would say. Germany released its first space security and safety strategy, and you have been involved in that. France unveiled a few days before the more muscular, defense-oriented space doctrine. And Switzerland also published its space power concept rooted in neutrality and norms. Germany, France, and Switzerland moving toward a shared European approach to space security, or are these fundamental different visions of what space power should be?
Yes, I would say we were moving into a more common view of space, that we see something that France was aware before, that space is not only a field for safety issues, so it's also for security issues. And that's why I find the name interesting. It's a German strategy for safety and security in space. It's a bit more condensed in Germany because we have the same word for safety and security, and it's only the Sicherheitspolitik. But nevertheless, it changed in this way that from the German point of view, we also see space as a strategic area where we have security issues, defense issues. So that changed. That means that Germany moved closer to the, I would say, French approach to space, but we also see from the UK and from others. So I think we now start having a more common view, and also what space power should look like, or what's the vision of space power. And space power would mean we see clear in all strategies that it's not only capabilities, it's also autonomy. So that being able to execute things in space, and that's something that comes on top, and especially as interesting from the German point of view, also willingness, showing that we don't only have the capabilities, we are willing to use them if it's needed. And it's something that's very precise, very clear in the German strategy, like showing the 3 different levels, how to react, and showing and clearly stating that we are willing to protect our assets in space, and not only our military assets, but also all the civilian, the commercial assets from Germany, from our partners and allies. So it's spelled out very clearly that we will have the willingness, that we want to build up the capabilities, but that we also act in space to protect our systems and are willing to execute this.
As you have been heavily involved in the German strategy, I think you read with interest also the French one. Who currently has a more credible and executable space security posture, and why? Or is it a checkbook versus capabilities?
France has more capabilities, still has, and also they talked about being able to act in space to protect their systems years ago. So they were already developing systems. So that's why they're still on the forefront. We're still behind. But what is remarkable in the German strategy is that it's also the specific goals, that we don't stop with the political goals. We have the lines of action they want to follow. So that's very precise. The question is who's more credible and executable is, but it's something you cannot answer on paper. That's something where we need to see how the implementation of the goals will be executed, if they are going to be executed or not, and there will be those actions. So that makes me very positive with regard to Germany, because it's not only strategy, but we started with this. We have a huge amount of money now. So it's not only we want to do these things, we also have the money to do this, and we have the precise lines of action. So now it is a clear plan to implement it and to execute it. And here the French strategy is more of a grand strategy, you can say. So it's more general. It's not that it was only a space strategy in general. It was not only a space security strategy. So clearly it was more broad. And also France is lacking the kind of financial feeding for this goal. So when we're talking about 35 billion for military space assets, there comes around 10 billion on top for ESA and from other ministries. So it's 45 billion in the next 5 years. And that's a huge amount of money. And I think France announced 4 billion additionally for space spend, for military space spending. So that's a huge gap between. So it's 10 times as much that we want to spend for space assets than France.
Wouldn't it be a crazy idea to work together? Where do we stand on a political level? We have now threats, obviously, on the eastern flank, but experience its threat also from the other side of the pond. The French government was much more clear on that over the last years, that America is not a friend per se, so we can't be relying on them. But both France and Germany are the core of Europe in any given terms, financially, industrial, and military. So where do we stand in the German-French relationship?
I think it goes straight into the French DNA, that they don't want to rely on the United States too much, that you don't need to go back a few years. You can go back straight after the Second World War and what happened in NATO in the 1950s and 60s. That's something, it's precisely the French strategy all the time. However, it would be good to work together, and that's some of the initiatives we see in the different levels. We see the initiative in the European Union. We see initiatives also in ESA, for example, also in NATO, to coordinate and making systems interoperational, so that we can work together, that not everybody has to build up everything, because we will not be able to do. For example, in Earth observation, we still have a kind of, let's say, informal cooperation or informal sharing, that France is focusing on Earth observation with optical systems and Germany is focusing on Earth observation with radar systems. And then we are sharing. So there are already some sharing of data and of space capabilities in Europe. So that's nothing new. I think that what might be changed and what might be a bit problematic for France, who is advocating for cooperation in the last years, but it was always implicitly meant that France is in the lead and then we are going to cooperate. That's also all the initiatives we see with nuclear umbrella and nuclear sharing. Now, what we see now is not only that Germany is by far having the most military spending on it. With this security strategy, we also see that now Germany wants to take the lead in Europe, the leading position, like with the suggested European Space Component Command. Germany definitely wants to coordinate and cooperate. They want to build up the command for bringing soldiers from different countries together for tactical operations. And that might be something hard to digest for France, I would say, if they're having a cooperation, but not being the leader any longer. Not by capabilities and not by money. They still have more capabilities, but that will change in the next 5 years. And then we will see who is going to coordinate the cooperation.
You mentioned the French DNA on that. We just have to look into the strategy again. The French strategy demands a leading role in the space capabilities for Europe under French leadership. And we will see how that will turn out. I think we only can hope that our politicians are bringing both countries together on an eye level, that we can really talk about a true collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's something why when you look at the German space safety and security strategy, a colleague of mine called it S4, which is interesting. It's not that explicit that Germany wants to take the leading role. So we see it in the second part with the political goals. You have it in between. We need more coordination on the European level. And then you need to go right down in the last part of the lines of action, and then you see it, you have it more explicitly spelled out, like also the space component command and so on. I think it's already taking this into consideration that Germany don't want to be so explicit, but nevertheless, I think it's a clear signal that there's the approach of a German coordination and leadership.
I think a good example for collaborative efforts, and you mentioned before, is ESA, the European Space Agency. And we just had the ESA ministerial in Bremen with the record budget was approved by the member states. And for the first time, they anchored defense and security as part of the ESA missions. And Germany emerged as the largest contributor, again with 5.3 billion, overtaking France. But France hardly made it to the second biggest contributor, and then just followed very closely by Italy right now. Does the ESA ministerial marks a moment when ESA becomes a true pillar of Europe's security architecture rather than just a civil agency?
I would not say it's a pillar itself. I would rather say it's part of the filling of the pillar. So that we will contribute. European security architecture and defense and space cannot rest on ESA alone, but ESA could be a part of it. You mentioned it's a civilian agency. It has until now a pure civilian approach. And we see some changes in the mindset of the civilian agency. It's not only that now there's a lot of money out for military assets, so ESA wants to also get a part of the cake, but we see a change in mindset that we see now dual use from both sides. It's not only that there's military assets that could be used for civilian applications. We also now see the openness that there might be pure civilian research and capabilities built up in ESA that could be also used for military. I would say that now ESA and also those politicians in these more research-oriented space sphere are getting more open towards that. Some of the things they're working on or the capabilities they could also have military applications, and that's not problematic any longer. So I would say rather see this way that in this field that ESA could also contribute to the security architecture by being more open-minded for dual-use aspects.
I think space inherently is dual use from the beginning. I wouldn't wonder if, and here I'm diverting a bit from what you said, I wouldn't wonder that ESA will open a new directorate, defense and security. That's where I see how ESA sees defense more on the safety and security level. I think there's a clear strategy. Also, with the 1.3 billion signing into these programs, that's a ministerial at the moment. And if we take space situation awareness, space domain awareness into this field, then ESA is active there already.
Yes, yeah, completely. There will be definitely more thinking also of ESA when thinking what we and the ESA technologies and the programs they have when thinking about what we need also in our military point of view, and especially smaller countries will be also looking at ESA and ESA research to improve their military footprint in space. But that's not it. It's only space. And we see with the different sectors of ESA that those who are more military relevant, for example, the European Micro-Launcher Challenge and general launches and others, they got oversigned, so they got more money was put in than in others. But it's also short-sighted because when you look at the field of exploration and human missions, then it was undersigned, so there was less money than ESA wanted to have. And okay, you can say that's also bringing people to the moon or maybe to exploration issues, but it's also part of, for example, of military assets, exploration, and especially when we look at what are the next geopolitical battlegrounds in space, then we definitely have to look to the moon. Yes, I would say that ESA will be getting a more military or security and defense role, but it will not be in the lead in this.
Why do you think the moon is of military importance as the next level? Because my sources give me a different impression that the moon is not as interesting for militaries. I mean, why do you think that has a military importance?
This is strategic importance on the cislunar field, but also if you have then a permanent moon basis, it's not only it's for research and it's all labeled research because of all it's a global common and it only has to be useful for peaceful usage. But however, it is a very strategic asset. If you're the first one there, you have a first mover advantage. You're also being able to making the rules of the lunar order, you can say. And also the south pole of the moon is a very strategic area where you have a strategic look on the Earth orbits. And so it is definitely a strategic asset if you are the first one there or if you have a moon base there.
So the strategy comes from the water resources and the peaks of eternal light. So the infinite energy sources, right?
Yeah, and also I would say that it's questionable if water's infinite on Moon. It's rather raw, but you have helium-3, for example, also there. And it would be able, if you want to go to the deep space exploration, if you want to go to Mars, then it would be better to start your rocket from the Moon. You have less gravity, less fuel, and also you can produce your fuel on the Moon with helium-3. And it looks like the Moon is big, but however, there are only a few spots that are capable of building up a permanent Moon base.
As we are doing a review of the year, so what was, in your view, the single most important positive geopolitical development in space in 2025? And I'm starting with a positive one.
That's the other question, I would say. There are a lot of positive aspects, but being a German, and as you said, I was very positively surprised. I would say it was the German strategy for safety and security in space. That was a really positive sign that we now, especially from Germany, starting to act in space and to realize space in all its dimensions.
Let's look at the other side of the spectrum. Which moment you might think we are heading into a more dangerous, destabilized space environment this year?
I would say that too. And one, which might be not so surprising, was in July when China managed to have successful docking of 2 satellites in geostationary orbit and also doing refueling, supposed to have done this. So that meaning it showed capability that the United States are not having yet.
What does it make dangerous? Because it's a capability all spacefaring nations are looking forward to it. For example,
yeah, we all want to have it because it's very great. If we can do in-orbit operations, you can do in-orbit servicing, refueling, but as all of these rendezvous proximity operations and in-orbit possibilities, they are of dual use. And so you can also address the systems of your enemies. If it's the US finds itself challenged in space and its space superiority by China. And now it's not only that China is building up, but it surpassed the United States. And now they have a capability they do not have. So I think that will fuel the arms race, counter space arms race we already have in space. And the second moment I would say was when the NASA itself acknowledged that they might lose the race to the moon and that China might be first again on the moon. When they acknowledging that they might fall behind. And it's maybe not destabilizing, but I think it's also dangerous. And I feel that shows that the US is falling behind in this race. And then they might lose their space superiority. It could also lead to some reactions where they think they need to build up their capabilities also in military aspects.
I see a point. Let's get out our crystal ball and look into what might 2026 bring to us. Europe is preparing for 2026, and the question is no longer whether space is geopolitical, but whether Europe can respond with speed, coherence, and capabilities, as we mentioned that before. What are the, let's say, 3 decisions Europe must take next year, 2026, to avoid another shock like the US intelligence cutoff to the Ukraine or in this order of magnitude event?
Yeah, I would say we need to take autonomy and building up sovereignty seriously. And here I would just give you 3 words, and it's like capabilities, it's interoperability, and it's launches.
That's not new. We're talking about it for years now. How do we turn these 3 buzzwords into action, into execution?
Yeah, we have to execute it and we have to turn it into action. That's the thing that we should have learned now. So talking about stuff the last since years, as we said, what's different 2025 to the years before. So we learned that we need launchers. We had the European launcher crisis in 2022. We had the EU SST with interoperability and thought about capabilities, build up and so on. But what must be changed now is that we really have to execute it. We really have to start action. And I see some dynamics. I see some positive signals. Not only we talked intensively on the German strategy and the money, but you also see it with the EU defense roadmap for 2030. And also one of the flagship programs should be the European Space Shield. So we have a commissioner for defense and space in the EU. So I see now some dynamics, and I see also some money for defense spending in general is dedicated for space. We need to execute it now. I think that's the thing where we definitely need to improve.
Last question. So if you had to identify one litmus test indicator for Europe's seriousness, Germany's budget execution, ESA's new security role, EU-NATO coordination, What would you watch most closely?
I would say all of them are very important, and we definitely have a close look on it. But I would say it's the coordination and it's accepted leadership. So we talked about France and Germany and who's coordinating it, who's taking the lead. I think that's something that I would have a close eye on, because if we want to be able now to execute all the things we said, and especially interoperability and so on, who's going to take the lead? Also the discussions between ESA and European Commissions. Now, when you had after the ministerial conference and the ESA General Director Aschbaur said, no, we had a very good coordination and cooperation now with the Commission. But it's a very complex and fragmented system in Europe. We have the different agencies, we have the Union, we have the different nations. We want to make it all interoperability. We all want to build up our capabilities better yesterday and tomorrow. But what we definitely will need is somebody who takes the lead, who's going to coordinate it, and that must be accepted leadership. So that's something I would have a close look on in 2026. What are the dynamics in this field, this regard?
What's your guess? Brussels, Paris, Berlin?
Maybe Berlin in coordination with Brussels.
Antje, thank you very much for your time. And I wish you a happy new year, and May 2026 be a great one for all of us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It was a great talk, and I also wish you a very lovely Christmas time and all the best for 2026.
If you have further questions, reach out to us at radio@SpaceWatch.Global. If you like these or other episodes of Space Café Radio, leave us a rating on your preferred podcast platform. It is the currency of today. And if you want to stay on the pulse of the space industry, please visit our website at www.SpaceWatch.Global and subscribe to our newsletters. And of course, don't forget to become a Space Watcher. I'm Thorsten Triening, publisher at SpaceWatch.Global, your independent perspective on space.